Hello, everyone, and welcome to another session of Quantum Tech for Healthcare. If this is your first session, let me kind of explain you what we are doing. We are holding online session for healthcare professionals who wish to join our quantum technology discussion and help to uncover new use cases. There is no need to be a quantum expert to enjoy this panel, yet I invite you to start exploring our page to get a wider understanding of all the segments that in healthcare and life science that quantum technology could potentially help transforming. This introduction session was built together with Sia Partners. We ask ourselves, what could be the day-to-day challenges in hospitals that quantum computer could potentially help optimize? So we gather healthcare and quantum experts to form this panel. Bernadette, would you like to say something?
Yeah, just a quick hello from Sia Partners as well. Just a quick word on why we're partnering with Quantum Tech for Healthcare. We work in deep tech commercialization, especially quantum, so building businesses around connecting quantum with use case in industry, especially healthcare. So we're excited to be part of this and facilitate this conversation on that intersection of end users and quantum experts. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernadette. And I think lastly, I would like to present our moderator, Olivier Ezratty. We asked him to join this session. Olivier is a consultant and author with a software engineer background. He's in quantum tech since 2017, and he's very active in building the quantum ecosystem in France. So lastly, before I hand over the discussion to Olivier, I hope you all to enjoy this session and invite you to use the chat to send us some questions, which we will do our best to cover this during our session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Eran. So we have 8 panelists, so it's a big panel. And in this panel, we have two kinds of individuals. First is people working in hospital in the healthcare system in the UK. And the others are quantum hardware, software, and services vendors. So we're going to have 2 views of this question that is being asked by Eran. So let me present to you all the members of this panel. So we'll start with Claire Liddy, who's the Director of Innovation at AlderHey Children's Hospital in the UK. We're going to have Mike Smith, who's an enterprise architect in NHSx. Let's say it's a tech and innovation branch of NHS in the UK. And then we have Matthew Versaggi, Senior Director of AI and Cognitive Technologies in Optum Technology, which is a healthcare provider in the UK as well. So on the vendor side, we'll start with Vishal Shete, who's working with Sia Partners, so the partner for that event. We have Jody Burks from IBM, who's a quantum academic partner technical lead, and she's the ambassador of the quantum tech for IBM. And we have to notice that she has a computational biochemistry background, so which is helpful in that space. Then we have Justin Ging, who is the Chief Commercial Officer at Honeywell. We know since last March that it's a new player in town in the quantum hardware space. Then Alex Condello, who's managing applications development tech and tools at Dwave, probably the older lady in the quantum space since the company was founded back in 1999. And then last but not least, we have Yianni Gamvros, who's the head of BizDev with Ware, a data science software platform company for quantum computers and one of the most active in that space. So that's the folks. Now let's start with trying to understand first what are the customer needs in the hospital market. And Claire, since you are in a hospital, you're the best position to explain us that. So how do you view the way to frame the areas of focus for preparing the hospital of the future, and what is the role of quantum tech in that space?
Oh, thank you, Olivier. Really delighted to be on the panel today. You know, I work in a hospital, so, you know, live it and breathe it on a day-to-day basis. What I'm not, though, is a quantum expert, but what I can talk about today is if we think about hospitals now and then maybe what a hospital will be like in 5 to 10 years time, I can start to talk through, you know, some of the opportunities. If we think of the needs, the challenges, the problems we have in healthcare systems and institutions, I can see so many opportunities for where the quantum technologies could be creating really exciting use cases. I'll start with just laying out 2 or 3 that, you know, I've been thinking through. I think the first one is to talk about data. You know, in the healthcare space, you know, we've been developing our technologies over time, and we've got, you know, millions of different healthcare tech already established in the hospital, and that's generating data. Every day we're making more and more data, but what we're not doing with it at the moment is making sense of it. There's actually too much of that data for the human mind to actually make sense of. So there's a big opportunity for me how we can use that data. Every patient episode, every interaction a doctor, a nurse or any other clinician has with a patient creates a data, and we should be learning and creating a research opportunity from every single intervention that we do, when we're not at the moment. And I just think about 5 years time, you know, once quantum computing has been developed and is given to, you know, healthcare as an opportunity, we can be thinking about digital twins, digital hospitals, even digital healthcare systems. And that data and the use of quantum potentially, I think, could enable us to, you know, in very fast pace, use that data to generate predictive ways of treating patients, predictive ways of preventing harms, preventing mistakes, and really delivering a different level of healthcare that actually maybe, you know, the art of the possible is we could keep, you know, patients well. You know, we could use data and surveillance, you know, to keep patients well at home, so they actually don't even need to enter a hospital. You know, they could have all of their healthcare in the future potentially, you know, in the comfort of their own home. So for me, that's one big opportunity that I see as something we might want to discuss today. I'll just quickly talk about, sorry, Olivia, did you want to come in there?
Oh, okay, go on.
Yeah, just that second opportunity, I think, is more maybe around the optimization of hospitals. You know, right now, you know, we run hospitals very much, you know, the way we did, you know, maybe 5, 10, you know, even more years ago. Some hospitals are more advanced with the use of technologies. But again, back to, you know, the future. If we could use quantum technology, you know, to get that data around how we run a hospital, how we schedule our patients, how we schedule our theatres, how we run our outpatient attendances, how we run our emergency departments.
Just on my side.
I see a huge opportunity for running the hospital in a more, you know, digitally enabled way that would make it, you know, better for patients, but also the clinical burden that comes, you know, from, you know, clunky systems would be removed, and clinicians would maybe have a better experience as they deliver care in that hospital settings. So I don't know whether that's 2 areas that we to throw on the table today for the panel to start the discussion, Olivia.
It's a long list, it's good. By the way, I presume you've been adopting new technologies in the past, I mean, particularly around machine learning and artificial intelligence. What are the key learnings you got from these new tech adoption that you can leverage with quantum tech?
Yeah, we have. So we've been, you know, very, you know, kind of early stage, you know, experimenting and discovery phase with using machine learning and some natural language processing. And I think for me, the key learnings are you need to really start with a real problem in the hospital, you know, that, you know, needs solving. You know, I think if you start with the problem and then bring the technology in to solve that problem and discover, you know, with a partner, perhaps, you know, with an industry partner, that's how we've done it, you know, really to try and understand, you know, that using that design thinking methodology to really scope that problem out, bring the technology in, you know, and work with that clinical team, you know, to validate the technology to see whether it is working, is it having impact, can you measure benefit from using them technologies. You know, at AlderHey, we've got kind of, you know, maybe, you know, a few algorithms in the machine learning space, both deployed and live now in our hospital, and very much in the hospital optimization space where we're using them machine learning algorithms to really improve how we plan, how we predict the care that we need to deliver. We've also got some more kind of pilot algorithms that we're using in the safety space. So we've got a couple of areas in medication errors, and we've got one in healthcare associated infections as well. But again, because of the nervousness that some have with, you know, using machines in the hospital setting, we're very much piloting them in almost kind of in parallel with the, you know, the clinical pathway that we're doing. So I hope that maybe is helpful, you know, for the panel today.
Okay. What would be the key message you would like to convey to those vendors we have in the panel? We have 5 vendors here. So what should they do to help you?
Yeah, for me, co-create with us. You know, we've got the problems, the real world problems in hospitals, you know, and actually before you know, jump too far ahead with developing your technologies and your algorithms, come and talk to us in the hospital setting around where should we prioritize, where are the big problem statements that will have big impact as well. You know, because I think the big goal for Quantum should be, it shouldn't just have impact in one hospital, in one centre of excellence. We should be really focusing on how we can get a win that we can then make kind of the standard that can be leveraged both across the UK and maybe across the globe, so that all patients get that benefit and that big impact from the use of these technologies. Would be my one comment for the vendors today.
Okay, good. So we'll skip to Mike. Claire is from Liverpool, by the way, and Mike, you run the NHS, well, you run the technology at the CTO office at NHSx. What is the global view you have on these problems? Is it different from a particular single hospital, or what's the global view on this for you?
Yeah, yeah, well, I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, yeah, thanks for inviting me to the panel, actually. So I'm quite looking forward to the discussion. I think, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think broadly speaking, our team is looking at technology change and digital transformation across the NHS. So I think the hospitals are interesting, or very interesting, because I think they've got the same and similar problems across other domains. What's interesting about hospital is the size and scale, and you know, the complexity is very, you know, it's like a smaller version of you know, the wider problem that we've got across the country. So it's a really good place to go and sort of try and test these technologies and approaches. I think if I step back in terms of the NHS, the sort of priorities that we have are set out in the long-term plan. So we're, you know, NHSx is responding to that through 5 core missions. And I think those missions, you know, are applicable to, you know, a lot of what Claire's sort of referenced, and covers things like reducing the burden on the workforce, ensuring information is made available, so they, you know, so they can be safely treated, and improving, you know, productivity as examples. I think if we sort of narrow down into specific sort of pain points, though, that I would say is, I would definitely agree that around sort of mobilizing staff effectively is one of the key things we need to do. You know, you can just see it from the news today. We've got issues with you know, backlogs on you know, diagnostic imaging that are adversely impacting the care being provided to patients with delays, and obviously COVID's made that situation a lot worse. So there's certainly a big area for me around how do we get the best use out of staff, and things like initiatives we've taken, such as a digital staff passport, are one level of that, which is going to allow us to move members of staff across organisations so that they can be deployed more effectively. But I think where I saw the opportunities around quantum potentially is if we consider you know, having more intelligence around how we deploy that staff, then we will need to take into account a load of factors, such as, you know, their skills training, their location, you know, and a number of other aspects. It feels like that could be quite a challenging problem, you know, around, you know, where you'd need some sort of machine learning applied to that, and therefore, does quantum computing give us that ability to sort of link, you know, give that acceleration around you know, deploying those algorithms. It's not something I would say I would be able to give you an answer on, but it's certainly something I'd love to sort of have a discussion around.
Would you say that the adoption of quantum tech is about the same as when you tried machine learning maybe 5 years ago, or is it different? Is it going to be different, a different path?
I think it's probably a similar path in the sense that I think there's a key challenges would be around we need to we need a shift in our thinking, you know. So with all new technologies, it always seems to be the same thing, that it's not the technology itself, it's the way you need to rethink the problems. And so if you look at blockchains and things like that, the shift in thinking. If we looked at event streaming, you know, you need to think about the problem domain differently. And again, with machine learning, you need to, it's almost the reverse of how you solve a problem, a classical problem, in the sense that what you're trying to do is gather the information and then provide it, to generate an answer, rather than having a preconceived answer to start with and then try and define and solve that. So with quantum, I guess my question would be, I don't understand what that shift in thinking looks like. So I'd love to sort of tease out some of that, definitely.
So you need some education to understand really what are the kinds of problems you can solve with quantum tech and the others which are made for machine learning.
Yeah.
Is it difficult to sort it out or not at this point in time?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's easy to read up about quantum, computing and stuff, but, you then have a conversation with someone who actually understands it, and you realize actually all you're doing is parroting things you read, rather than actually being able to understand and apply it to a real world problem. So it's with all new technologies, it's that grassroots, building that grassroots is critical to actually making any sort of progress. And I think that's probably one of the challenges that we've found with other technologies like machine learning, is actually we're great at doing the innovation piece, but actually scaling it out is historically been the issue that we've had. So I think whatever we do in this space is start thinking about how do you scale this out so that actually we can get widespread adoption as soon as possible. Yeah.
Okay, let's move to Matt.
Right here, hiding in the corner.
I see him, yeah. So, yeah, in the middle, yeah. So, Matt, you are in insurance companies, so it's a different perspective. So, same question. How do you think quantum can get started in the consumer side of hospitals? What could be the benefit, and what are the key pain points to be solved there?
Yeah, so we're kind of on the healthcare side and the payer side. So we're on healthcare tech and the payer side. So we're in a unique space. But I would echo much of what Mike said. I think it's spot on. When you're getting started, I think it's very important to understand the difference between the producer and consumer equation here in the quantum computing space, and understand that the majority of the educational process has been geared towards people making the technology. Dense quantum physics, opaque mathematics, things like that. Very little of that educational process or resources have been dedicated to the consumer side of that. Those who are going to use that tech once it's developed and a clear winner has been established amongst all of the competition there. And so that has to be understood. That context frames everything, because the folks that are going to be on Mike's side of the fence or my side of the fence or anybody on the consumer side of that fence have very different education requirements. To get that group of people up and going as a constituency that can use the technology that eventually gets thrown over the fence is a very different pool and educational pedagogy to do that. So that has to be understood. Given that though, and in that context, you do anything you can just prior to having affordable, ubiquitous quantum computing capabilities available that you can actually solve problems with. And there's a ton of stuff that we can do before that event horizon hits. And so, you need to stand up competencies. You need to get people educated in the software engineering and professional consultancy space, because that's what the consumer side is going to need. They need to actually be doing work and stuff that they can actionably do, which isn't create the, you know, the material science for holding subatomic particles to do information processing. That's not it. What it is examine the algorithms and the business questions and the clinical questions in the healthcare space from a lens of quantum computing and see what can be achieved with, and this is the key backdrop to all of that, because of the severe restrictions of quantum computing in its innate sense, there's only a very small subset of things we can tackle in terms of the problem space. Knowing that gives us a better lens of what to attack. So I'll punt back to you on that. Hopefully that lays some context to it all.
Okay, that gives a good idea. But would you validate the view from most of the vendors in that space, which is it's the right time to start testing proof of concept at a very low scale, and then to deploy when hardware is available? Is it the right methodology?
Absolutely, and for a number of reasons. There's no question. First, there's no fast followers. You can't do a Microsoft on here and attempt. Everybody pays the same educational and development tax because of the nature of this space. There's no fast followers there. There's the second of three reasons is that, you know, when the RSA encryption issue becomes truly real, then there's going to be this glut of executives who are freaking out. And they go, oh my God, RSA is going to be broken. When it becomes real, it's kind of a fairy tale right now, but it will become real in time. When that happens, that will be the key driver in the corporate sense, ubiquitously and globally, to push people moving forward. That event horizon is coming. To prepare for that is going to be smart. And then the third reason to articulate get started now is the open conflict between the US and China in the quantum and AI war. That is an open conflict with geopolitical stakes that are enormous, like decades of dominance that are at stake here. And both of those entities are entrenched and digging their heels in. They both have the biggest resources academically, militarily in some sense, and funding-wise, as well as engineers. And they're both digging in for that fight. That's mobilizing a whole bunch of people to solve basic problems who are sitting there pouring beers at the local bar for you because the physics major couldn't get a job.
Okay. And you are both an AI and quantum expert. Would you say that people who are dealing with quantum tech should embed that in a more global tech view? I mean, not isolate the quantum space in a narrow niche somewhere in the organization, and create a kind of global view on what all these techs can bring, because there's a lot of sorting to do when you need to choose the right technology for the right need. You need to have this global view.
You do, but it also depends on what space you're in. So if you're on the consumer side, traditionally you're not going to be in the sensor space like Lockheed Martin or any of the defense departments where you're looking at quantum sensors and quantum hardware, quantum IoT devices, that kind of stuff. Medical might have some more of that, but if you're looking at solving business problems or clinical problems or hospital problems, you're going to end up being on the software side, the algorithm development side, the embedding of those to either solve wholesale problems that are quantum friendly, or because we can break up problems into smaller problems that could be sent over to a GPU or CPU, QPU, quantum processing unit, and they kick back. That allows us to take non-wholesale problems, break them up into those smaller components that could benefit from a quantum speed up or quantum parallelism or something like that, and then continue on from that. So that opens up a wide aperture of kinds of things that can be approached in the space.
Okay, right. Let's move to Vishal. You are a service vendor in that space. Probably you will play the role of the educator of this panel. So explain us the kinds of optimization you can do with quantum software. Where is it relevant in the hospital space? And well, how do you pick and choose the right tools to do things?
Yeah, thanks, Olivier. No, I think what you said is right? What we do is kind of sit in between corporates or healthcare organizations and quantum technology firms, right? Like, so we identify the right problems that could be solved, should be solved, and can be solved today, and then map them to how they can be solved with quantum technologies. And we've been doing this for quite a while, actually, in the quantum space. So the first thing to say is, there's a view that true quantum computing is, 5+ years away, which it is, right? But there are some early stage versions of that technology which we look at. which can create value today. So we look at quantum inspired technology, quantum simulation, and so on. And these different technologies can create value today by solving particular problems in a way that's over and above what can be solved with classical computing. And I'll go into some examples of how we're doing that. And I'll make one more point on just the technology side before I dive into some of the use cases and projects we've been working on, which is the differentiation between quantum and machine learning. Right? Like, so there's a little bit of a view that quantum is a version of machine learning. So this is people that are not sort of super close to quantum. There's sometimes a view that quantum is a version of machine learning. It's not. It's a completely different paradigm, completely different technology, completely different approach. Quantum powered machine learning is a thing, but it's actually quite far away. It's actually not one of the first few things that will be matured, right? Using quantum technologies, what will be matured is optimization type problems, right? So optimization type problems will be matured or are maturing much quicker than quantum machine learning or some of those. Just on that, optimization type problems, the right ones can actually be solved today at scale. And I'll go into some examples of how we're doing that. A couple of ones, right? So firstly, on the clinical side, one area which is super interesting is around radiology. And particular, it's the precision radiology that you can do. So to be able to configure the right dosage, the right strength, the right kind of frequency of treatment, the right angle, the right frequency of treatment is quite a complex challenge. And radiologists actually spend quite a lot of time trying to find the right combination of those parameters to get the best combination, such that the radiotherapy will be able to attack just the tumor cells and not the rest of the body, right? It's a hugely complex challenge, which current computation powers don't solve optimally, right? Using early stage quantum technology, there have been proof of concepts done, which are exactly at this space, which show a marked improvement, which is significant, right?
There is a question from the audience
Yeah.
that I think is relevant for you. It's a very interesting one for quantum tech.
Sure.
Is how do you encode the data in the quantum computer? When you have a lot of data, how do you encode it?
Yeah, so the encoding of the data is through, there's different providers have APIs with which you can accept the data. So typically, there's data sets that you can use. Just on the data point, actually, another misconception is you need huge volumes of data to make quantum computing useful. This is not true. Complex challenges exist with even a small data set. A classic version of a NP complete problem, so in other words, a problem which cannot be solved with current technology, is the traveling salesman problem, which a lot of people would have heard of, right? Where a salesperson needs to go to 20 cities and they want to find the best way in which they can traverse those 20 cities, so they minimize the distance traveled. So 20 or so, 25 data points, that's over a billion or a few billion combinations in which that problem can be solved, right? So small data set, explosion of possibilities, very difficult to find the optimal answer. And those are really, really good problems for early stage quantum computing and full state quantum computing to start with.
Okay, small data, but complex problems.
Yeah,
simply
exactly.
told. It's still a technical question that it has to be answered when looking at the way you develop software and so on. How would you rate today's quantum tech maturity? Because what can we do really with existing hardware? Yeah. Even though there are probably some key differences between D-Wave computers and others, and what's the status today?
So there's different, again, as I said, with existing hardware, there's a range of things you can do with early stage kind of quantum inspired approaches, which apply some of these principles to different types of existing supercomputers. You can solve significant problems at scale. So for example, in scheduling, right? Scheduling and optimization of resources, that can be done at quite a large scale, much greater than possible with classical computing, right? So that's one area where we've applied this in different contexts. We've applied this in healthcare, in hospitals, and in different places to create significant value. So scheduling is a clear kind of first starting point. On the clinical side, as we said, radiology is a good place to look at. And then on the macro side, we've been speaking to some governments about using early stage quantum technology actually for vaccine distribution. So optimizing the way in which you distribute the vaccine such that it provides maximum protection as quickly as possible, taking into account, production facilities, macroeconomic factors, kind of population health stats, and so on, to find what is the optimal way in which you distribute the vaccine. So these are just some examples of where people can get started today.
By the way, there's a question from Caspar Thomas in the audience. He wants to know about the use of quantum tech in drug testing. It's not the topic of this panel, so it was covered in another panel. We are really looking at hospital optimization right now, so that's why we don't cover the whole biotech and drugs and protein folding space, which is a fairly different one. One thing I find very difficult right now when I'm looking at the case studies in the healthcare space is how to sort it out between the proof of concepts, very low scale proof of concepts, compared to the ones that are really, I would say, production grade. Mm-hmm. Are there some in the last category right now, or are most of the case studies right now more in the just the trials?
No, absolutely. There are definitely some in the later category using quantum inspired technologies, right? So which is what we've been doing. So some of the projects we've been doing are in that second category. So I think
you should recall people, quantum inspired doesn't require a quantum hardware.
Yeah, quantum inspired doesn't require quantum hardware. That's true, exactly. But it can start you on the process through to, as the hardware matures, you have kind of the platform ready to take advantage of that hardware, and you can create value today, which is better than what can be done with other classical techniques. So that's quite an attractive proposition for us.
So you would say right now you already have production grade case studies using quantum inspired algorithms. Okay.
Absolutely.
Can you mention it or?
Yeah, I mean, I can't go into too much detail, but around optimization, around scheduling, there's huge value to be added. I mean, there's confidentiality. I can't go into too much detail around that, but especially in those spaces, there's lots of excitement to be had, and clearing out some of the sort of extended backlogs and challenges that we've got in so many spaces.
By the way, one question that will connect you to the other the panelists is. Should a hospital or a healthcare organization pick and choose right now a hardware vendor, or should they stay neutral for a long time?
There are options to be able to do both, So some platforms like Microsoft Azure Quantum Platform allows you to develop technologies today and connects you with multiple people, right? So Azure Quantum is just one example. There's others that do that as well. But they connect you with, for example, Honeywell, if you wanted to, with IonQ, with I think Rigetti as well, and a few others, right? So that gives you the ability to not necessarily bet with one technology, but create a solution that can work across a range of technology types.
Will it come from software vendors, those who are developing middleware solutions, and which are creating this layer, the independent layer?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good. Let's move to Jody. So the first hardware vendor of the panel. So you represent IBM, and IBM has a particularity to be one of the most vocal industry vendor in this area. I remember you started launching the Q Experience program back in 2016. So you have a long-lasting experience in evangelizing the market and probably a lot in the healthcare space. So what have you done? What have you learned from doing this in the healthcare space?
Well, in the healthcare space, what we've seen is a lot of, again, we hear optimization, machine learning. We hear that quite frequently from the other panelists, but also that's what we've been seeing. So some of the areas that we've seen may have the greatest impact would be like accelerating diagnoses from, again, radiation oncology, image analysis, things like that might help consumers. Also, some of the intersectional areas like personalized medicine that can also help with the safety for patients, for decreasing costs. optimizing pricing, optimizing resources that are available, whether it's an OR or a diagnostic equipment, things like that. So we're hearing a lot of different use cases, a lot of different possible applications in that space. The biggest thing is, of course, working with partners to identify the first ones to tackle, or the best use cases to tackle with a quantum computer.
And which are the kinds of players you're working with in the healthcare space? Hospitals, software vendors, research people? Where are you betting the farm?
Community effort. So a little bit of everyone. I don't know that I have clearance to name specific names, of course, but for example, insurance companies working on optimizing pricing for premiums and costs, working with healthcare to design algorithms for scheduling would be another one. One big one that I've been involved in some discussions with is actually the medical imaging. So edge detection, optimizing that, for example, to where radiologists, it's kind of like using ML. In fact, some cases are using ML to accelerate that, in addition to using quantum aspects in those analysis, I guess, pipelines, if you want to call it, that new methodology, that new workflow, to accelerate the identification of problematic areas in those images.
And IBM has a very ambitious plan. I mean, with regards to hardware, we've seen the announcement from September,
yes,
with a post from Jay Gambetta. So he announced that in 2024 you would have about a bit more than 1,000 qubits. Okay,
that's the goal.
maybe yes, maybe not. But what can we do? What will we be able to do in this time frame, in 4 years, with those 1,000 qubits? How is it going to be expanding the scope of what we can do in the healthcare space?
It would be scaling up. Okay, so first of all, what you can do today would be taking a first step. We want to be able to scale that up. So problems that are identified in a small space right now would be scalable up to where they can do some really exciting things. That's the idea anyways. So you want to be thinking about that now when you're identifying problems to tackle, but you also want to, of course, break them up. As was previously said before, with the systems that will be available in 4 years, for example, with chemistry, I know my background is chemistry, I know it's not the focus here, but we would be able to calculate or the most optimal structure for a much larger molecule that we can right now. That's taking into account many more bond angles, many more bond lengths, many more pieces of data. So if you're looking at your problem right now, thinking, oh, I can only calculate something using a few pieces of data, that's great. We want to be able to scale that. Take that idea, take that methodology, take that way of thinking and scale it up to where you're able to look at even more pieces of data. Okay. I don't know an exact number off the top of my head for that with 1,000 qubits, but it would be quite a bit more pieces of data.
So early on, I asked Claire, what should the vendors do? And so I ask you the same question. What should hospitals do to work with you? The other way around.
Design thinking and similar approaches. I love Claire's response about that. The first thing that I would recommend is, look, hospitals and hospital networks, insurance companies, partners, no one has to do this alone. And I wouldn't expect anyone to try and do that. You have to understand there's no fast start. There's no ramp up. Everyone needs to work together, and oftentimes discovery depends on the way you look at things. So if you get multiple perspectives in the same team trying to solve the same problem, you're most likely going to have a more informed and more effective solution. So the first thing that I would do is, and this is at the individual hospital level, because each hospital is going to have different challenges, different constraints, get your people in the room, get your experts in the room. And whether that's a developer that's working on a very specific problem, a data scientist, an analyst, clinician, get anyone that, one, is interested, but two, actually works on your most challenging problems. Get them in a room, brainstorm, get a short list, and then reach out or get a short list of your challenges that you want to try and tackle. Because quantum computing does require a different way of thinking. It's not just zeros and ones and, oh, I'm going to crank out some Python code. It's, you have, in order to put your, encode your information, you actually have to think about the problem at the most fundamental level in order to code that onto the different qubits. So once you have a short list of your biggest challenges, bring in industry experts, consultants, and get everybody in the same room. Your experts at your individual hospital and experts from industry, and then put everyone together. And then that way you'll have the expertise coming in that can say, okay, your problem, let's start breaking it down into those individual pieces. Where is a quantum computer going to be the best fit for which step? How do we want to use it? What algorithms do we have available today that can tackle that? If we can't tackle it today, but we can tackle it 4 years from now, how do we break that down as a practice? How do we, what are the baby steps involved? Okay. So once you're co-creating, once you're brainstorming together and working together, you can start making that partner, you can have results from that partnership. And we've seen that before in the financial industry. We've seen that before in other industries, chemistry, materials. But one thing I do want to point out is when you're working with experts with quantum computing, they may have ideas that come from the financial industry, that the algorithms used there for optimization, it may actually be useful for edge detection and may be useful for optimizing your scheduling, of course. A lot of our chemistry algorithms that we'll see are actually optimization algorithms. So you'll see crossover between industries. So definitely be open to the algorithms and the techniques that you're seeing in other industries, because while the type of problem may look very different on the surface, when you boil it down to each individual step, how you're moving that data through the different steps of the algorithm, there may be crossover. You may be able to recycle something that's already been done. Okay.
By the way, we have a funny question from the audience. It probably has many meanings, but is this another Watson?
No, this is not another Watson. So Watson is AI. Quantum computing is not AI. So,
yeah, but probably the meaning is Watson as a kind of non-product or platform or set of tools.
Okay, so we have our hardware, we have our software that in our open source. We have a community. This is growing every day. This is, so Watson is not a you can think of Watson kind of as a black box AI for everyone. Quantum computing
toolbox,
is
maybe more toolbox. Yeah.
Right. Quantum computing, I don't want to call it a black box because look, I can teach anybody to code a quantum computer. Anyone can learn. The resources are in fact out there. And we can actually get use from it. We are seeing, again, we are starting small. That's the biggest thing to understand right now is the problems that we're solving right now are on existing hardware that's available today. They're designed to grow. So Watson it has its applications, but this is very different, very separate in any way, shape, or fashion from quantum.
Okay, thanks. Justin, so you work at Honeywell. We probably don't have time to explain the difference between trapped ion qubits with superconducting qubits from IBM. But I've got a very broad question first. Is should we try to understand, so should we try to understand the nail or the hammer first when you want to create new solutions? We don't hear you. We have to, you have to switch the mic on.
Sorry, Olivier.
You're back. Fine.
Yeah, sorry about that.
So nail or hammer?
I'm sorry. Please repeat the question. It's a little bit messed up.
It's a speed question. Should we try to understand the nail or the hammer first? I mean, the problem or the technology?
So I think it's a joint
to be able
effort.
to innovate the right way. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, Jody touched on this, and I would want to reiterate that this is not something where you can come and say, what are you going to do for me with quantum? This is a what are we going to do together? Because everyone's got a piece of the problem. So healthcare institutions have that application knowledge. They know what the problems are, where it's ripe fruit for tackling. Algorithm writers have that that approach of how do I take a classical problem and convert it into the quantum space. And hardware vendors have the job of bringing up the very best hardware with the best set of tools, new features, new ways of thinking to address it. So I really think that we need to develop the hammer and the nail together, because it could be that we're on a path to develop a generalized quantum computer, and perhaps for certain problems, it becomes more of like an ASIC type solution where we make a quantum computer that's particularly dedicated to certain kinds of problems. We have a long way to go to get there, because we need to figure out how to start addressing these problems. That's why we're starting small. And that's why everyone's on the panel and saying, let's do this today. Let's do this together. Got to start now, because there's a lot of work to do. It's at the research phase, and we're all trying to move as quickly as possible to those solutions.
So how would you say, how would you rate the return on investment for healthcare companies? It should be viewed as very long-term, mid-term?
I think it has to be thought of in terms of what you're getting right now. You are getting a return. When you put your investment in now, you're getting that learning. It's a strategic return on investment. You're building out your capability. You're finding out how to engage with quantum. You're finding out which kinds of problems. And so the benefit you're getting isn't I saved 3% on my supply chain or something like that. It's more of a strategic setup. Over time, as these problems get more sorted out, and which ones are we going to use quantum for, which ones are we putting into production, then we'll see that financial return on investment. It'll be easier for the finance departments to be able to put a one-to-one thing of like, I'm using quantum for this kind of savings or this kind of benefit. But for now, it's much more strategic.
It seems we are cut. I'm not sure. Are you back?
I'm here. Yeah.
Maybe not. So let's move to Alexander from Dwave. Oh, you're back. Sorry. You're back, Justin?
From my end, it's still good. Yeah.
Okay. It seems fuzzy. So there was one last question: is what should be the best way to get engaged and involved in the quantum space when you are a consumer in this market?
I think what Jody laid out is a very good explanation of thinking through the problem and then engaging with some players and understanding what kinds of problems to address and working as a team. As I mentioned, kind of the ecosystem in quantum, everyone's happy to get involved with these kinds of projects, starting with a proof of concept to take one of those small problems and really use that as a way to dive in and understand what pieces you have, what pieces you need, and develop that solution.
Okay, thanks. Alexander, so you represent Dwave, and Dwave has a very big advantage compared to the others. You've been in town for 8 years with a series of, I don't know, 5 or 6 generations of quantum annealing computers. So it looks like you have a very broad portfolio of solutions in the healthcare space. So what are the first apps that will make sense in that space? What do you have in store?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm going to agree with some of the things said by a lot of the earlier panelists that I think the first apps are really going to be in this sort of optimization space. I mean, optimization problems can be applied to a wide variety of problems. I think both Matt and Jody mentioned this, that, even when you're doing chemistry problems, often you're really solving the bottleneck is an optimization problem as part of it. And so, two apps that we actually have like at full scale now that are in the healthcare industry. One is with Mentin AI, which is looking at protein design. The other one, unfortunately, I'm not yet at liberty to mention the name, but we're doing scheduling apps that are very, very relevant to some of the problems that were mentioned earlier. How do you schedule a large workforce when there's these sort of second order constraints? Like this person could be both a cashier, or they could work the front desk, or they could be doing this other thing, or they could be nursing on this floor or on that floor. these sort of second order effects are exactly the place that these problems become difficult, and are also exactly the place that quantum computing can provide value by sort of looking at the problem more holistically.
But those apps you're mentioning, they are production grade or trials?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll differentiate D-Wave just a little bit from some of the stuff that's been said before, which is, we broadly are trying to take the approach that we'll start with a hybrid solution at production scale. So this is actually a little bit closer to what Vishal was mentioning with quantum inspired, but we have a hybrid system, both classical and quantum. And then rather than starting at a small scale and building up, we start at the large scale and measure how much our quantum is contributing. And how much of that bottleneck is, of that computation is being provided by quantum, and measure ourselves against increasing that number. And one of the values of that is that it makes things easier for the user, because they don't have to be so concerned is this problem really, hard enough for quantum? I mean, this is something that we used to spend a lot of time talking about, but most users just want a system that's robust. They want to know that if my scheduling problem is easy, it's solved. If it's hard, it's solved. And by taking a hybrid approach, we can be more resistant to those sort of differences. We can solve the easy problems, maybe benefiting from quantum, maybe not. We can solve the hard problems, maybe benefiting from quantum, maybe not, and abstract those difficulties away from the user. Now, it's still relatively early days, but with this approach, we've been able to build some sort of production scale applications with partners that are ready for prime time, as it were.
And I'm going to create a link with Yianni from QC4HC. What's your approach with building a software ecosystem with D-Wave, broadly speaking, and also in the healthcare space? What are you doing exactly?
Was that for Alexander or me?
It was for Alexander first, and then Yianni, we're going to play with you next.
Sorry, I thought the question was for Yianni. Could you say it again?
No, it was for you, because you have been investing a lot in building a software ecosystem, and 1Qubit in Canada and others. So what's the approach, and how do you balance the load? I mean, how do a vendor can't do anything like IBM and Honeywell? So what's the way to best partner with a dedicated vendor in the healthcare space?
Totally. So I'll really repeat what I think both Justin and Jody and any others said, which is that it has to be a partnership. I mean, we are experts in building quantum computers, and we're decent at software, but we don't have the data, we don't have the problem expertise, we don't have the real world practical problems that the customer does. And I think D-Wave feels this way, and all the vendors do, which is we're all in the position of taking something that's abstract and theoretical and trying to apply it to the real world. We're all in this industry because we are interested in that problem, and we're motivated by that. So when it comes to building a software ecosystem, I mean, first off, we work in open source for this exact reason, which is that we want to lay out for the user what we're doing. We want to be transparent, and we want them to engage and to see exactly how all this works if they're interested in understanding how the sausage gets made. But we're also interested in sitting down in a room with smart people who can lay out where are their problems, and then take a sort of holistic view and say oh, we actually can unblock this particular bottleneck, or over there might not be such a thing that we can help right now, but maybe later, or that whole area maybe we can't help even in the long run. So every problem will have a different degree of benefit from quantum, and the only way to sort of really sort that out is to look at it holistically and build more of these use cases and build more of these intuitions that then get fed into open source. And in doing so, we can build, really build expertise in an area like healthcare. So I'd say that ball is getting rolling in healthcare. We have a couple of use cases that are coming down the pipe. We're starting to build some intuition, but there's still a long way to go, which is could be intimidating, but also is a really important opportunity to, be part of the conversation of how does quantum affect healthcare? This is really a really excellent time to be shaping that and working with all the vendors to solve that problem.
There was a technical question. Maybe we're going to take it for you. How close are we to solve optimization problems using QAOA?
Yeah, I saw the question was specifically about TSP, and I'll just take the opportunity to mention that not all optimization problems are created equal. I saw in the chat that someone had responded that TSP, the typical formulation, requires n squared qubits for the number of cities, and that's true. And in fact, TSP is well solved by permutation solvers. Now, it's possible to construct a permutation solver that benefits from a quantum computer, but taking TSP as a whole problem and then encoding it as a QUBO and using QAOA or quantum annealing probably isn't going to provide value in the near term. However, taking a TSP solver and then using, you know, a quantum computer to accelerate that solver, that's where the power of quantum really comes. And I think that thinking about it at that level of abstraction is really important, and is going to be increasingly true, that we're not just taking whole problems and trying to, you know, fit that oval, you know, shape into a square peg. It's we're finding certain parts of that problem that are difficult or can be accelerated and solve that.
Thanks, and thanks, Alexander. So let's move to Yianni. You are the jam and the butter in the sandwich between the hardware vendors and the hospitals. So what's your approach?
Thanks. Yeah. So we are a software quantum computing company, and specifically we specialize in building new algorithms. So why do we need new algorithms? Because these devices work fundamentally different. So just to compare and contrast a little bit of what we do. So hardware vendors are building machines that are bigger and better, right? So every new iteration that comes out in the market from IBM, from Honeywell, from everybody else is all about essentially having more qubits and better qubits. We, on the other hand, come from the problem essentially from the other side. So every new algorithm or software version we design is meant essentially to provide tools to solve the same problem, but with fewer qubits actually, or provide better performance. So we actually are hardware agnostic. So we work actually with multiple hardware vendors. We work with Honeywell and we work with IBM. We work with Dwave. Actually, we're one of the first partners with Dwave. And so we kind of close the gap from the other side. So they build more and more qubits. We design software and algorithms that require less and less qubits, and eventually these two things will meet in the middle, right? So the software side or the algorithm side is an important side that actually most people don't think about in the quantum computing space. Obviously, we do need the machines, absolutely. It's a big requirement to actually have hardware, but there's a sort of a complementarity in the software space, in this algorithm space, and that's basically what we represent.
But are you vertically integrated or horizontally integrated? Meaning, are you creating generic algorithms applicable to any market, or are you trying to find ways to design algorithms relevant for the healthcare market, hospital market?
So we are specifically looking at problem classes. We are looking at the optimization problem class. We're looking at machine learning. We're looking at a few others like chemistry simulation and Monte Carlo. And you're right. I think there's a lot to be said about getting vertically integrated and actually attacking a very specific industry problem. And we're actually doing that a lot with many of our enterprise partners. So we've worked with Goldman Sachs in finance. We work with Airbus in aerospace. We've worked with BMW in automotive, and in there we have fine-tuned a specific optimization algorithm for these different industry sectors. We are now beginning to work in pharmaceuticals more and more. We don't have a specific partner yet in healthcare, but we're definitely looking, because you're right, it's the vertical integration that actually gets you to real interesting results. Why now question. I know a lot of people are asking why engage right now, and I'm going to say just it's possible to draw a lot of conclusions from what you did in your machine learning and AI and digital transformation initiative. There are a lot of parallels in quantum computing and ML and AI. We have the same constraints we had with hardware 5 or 6 years or 7 years ago with ML. And then all of a sudden GPUs were available, and there's again the same lack of skills, and the same is true for quantum computing. So doing things soon and getting traction soon is really important.
I just want to point out, I saw a question in the chat about how can having users access quantum computers right now. And I just want to point out that various vendors have ways of either freely or for low cost accessing systems for training purposes, for education purposes, for research. I know, for example, we have resources that are available for free for researchers and educators in addition to the community. So when we're talking about community ecosystems from various vendors, a lot of those have access points via the APIs, and you can get in touch or just Google the different vendors for the various links on how to get engaged.
Just like still to ask the last question to Claire, to circle back to the beginning. So what have you learned from this discussion, and is it changing your views, or is it something you already knew? How could you wrap up all this discussion for us with the customer perspective?
Well, that's a big ask, but I'll try. Can I just say thank you to all the panel members today? I've really enjoyed the discussion today. It's been really enlightening. But I think what I've learned today is quite a lot, but I've learned that actually we need to work together. So my big closing statement is, if we work together and create that ecosystem, that quantum ecosystem, I think that's how we're going to get success, which will have impact for patients, which is what we all want. Thank you so much, Olivier.
Thanks a lot. So we have to prepare a good sandwich. Thank you, everybody.
So I would like to thank everyone. Olivier for the moderating, Claire, Mike, Vishal, Matt, Justin, Jody, Alex, and Yianni. It was a great session. For those who joined us on a later stage, or any colleague of you who missed the session today, will be published a recording in the coming few days. So I invite you to visit our page and learn more about the future panel. Hope you enjoyed this session, and looking forward to see you in 2021. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Been a pleasure.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye all.